Hey everybody, the next topic is on triggers. So, a trigger is anything that reminds us of using, reminds the brain of use or situations where use was involved, situations where you've thought of use a lot, anything involving use. Just like when we learn things as a child, let's say like we're presented with a set of flashcards and the flashcard that we have to memorize is like the word apple. So every time we see the red apple on the flashcard, we learn that that word apple is connected to that flashcard. So when we see apple then in the real world, we can go apple. That's a connection our brain makes. It's learning. Triggers work the exact same way. Our brain connects what happened when we were around that trigger to the thing itself. So it connects the feelings, which when we're using drugs and alcohol, the feelings are very strong and overpowering. It connects the things that happen afterwards, it connects everything. But the things it remembers more than anything else are the good feelings. It remembers good feelings more than negative feelings. So even if we had a bad experience with using drugs and alcohol, someone's arrested, someone gets into a fight with their partner, the brain will, more than anything else, remember the good feeling of being high, right? The excitement, the adrenaline, the energy, the positive feelings. And then somebody gets sober, they go back out into the real world, and they might be faced with these triggers all over their environment, especially if they've been using for a lot of years. They might have thousands and thousands of triggers because they've used all over the community, maybe, right? They've used in all these houses in St. Joe County. They know so many people in the community that if they see that person could be a trigger. They've used during every kind of part of their life. They've used when they're doing their hobbies, so their hobbies might be a trigger now. They've used when they're sad, happy, mad, glad, on a sunny day, a rainy day, anything, any reason they used. And so all those things could be now a trigger for the brain to go, hey, I remember that good feeling, give it to me again. And that's what ends up happening is the kind of pattern is, I should have wrote this down, but a trigger will trigger the brain to have the memory of the use, and the memory is usually involved with good feelings, right? That will lead to a thought, which if you watch the relapse justification video, that can be a lot of the thinking there. The thought of, oh, I could use. Oh, I remember when I did use. What if I used? Then if the thought is left unchallenged and it's just let loose to do whatever it wants to do, a craving can occur, okay? If you do challenge the thought and you say, no, you know what, that's a very bad idea for me to go use today. These are all the consequences that are going to happen, which that can be taught in therapy, how to do that more. Then you can get rid of the craving and it not be a problem. But if it's left unchallenged, it's going to become a craving and then could lead to use, right? So first thing is, though, to figure out what the hell triggers are. We want to identify what our triggers are first and foremost. Then if we know what they are, we can prevent being around them as much as possible. If you know your trigger is the gas station, you can drive around the gas station and not go to that particular gas station. Avoid as much as possible. Avoid the people, places, and things that you can. If you cannot avoid the things, like let's say a trigger is an emotion, then you learn the skills, coping skills you need to deal with the trigger as it comes up. You learn how to challenge your thinking so it doesn't become a craving. You learn how to deal with the craving if it happens to become a craving, how to not give in to the craving, right? Which is what therapy is here for. So the first video I'm going to do on triggers is just like what they are, and then I'll do a video on coping with them. So there are two categories of triggers. The first is external triggers, which means things that are outside of us. Things that sometimes we can't control, but hopefully we can avoid these things. Not always, though. I'm just going to list these off because there's a lot of them. Types of external triggers: being home alone, being home with friends, certain friends that we've used with would be a big one. Friends' homes, doesn't even have to be friends' homes. Homes where there's been drugs, right? Places that you've used drugs in. Parties, sporting events is a big one for people, with drinking, of course. Movies, even outside of movies, like if you've watched a particular movie a bunch of times, while using, that particular movie itself could be triggering for you, right? Okay, bars and clubs, beach, concerts, being with friends that use drugs and watching them use drugs, like I mentioned before in a video about relapse justifications, when gaining weight, vacations and holidays, when it's raining, before a date, during a date, before sexual activities, during sexual activities, after sexual activities, before work, when carrying money, going past a dealer's house, going past any house you've bought drugs, used drugs, driving, liquor store, during work, right after work, talking on the phone, being at a recovery group. I've heard a lot of people say that being at the group itself is triggering for them, and that could be for a few reasons. The group might not be amazing and they might glorify using, so it's a trigger. The people in the group might leave and immediately go use afterwards. That would be a trigger. Not all recovery meetings are like that. I would really suggest not just writing them off completely and finding one that doesn't do that and it's more serious, but some of them can be a trigger, and I recognize that. After payday, before going out to dinner, before breakfast, at lunch break, while at dinner, passing a particular street or exit, school, the park, in the neighborhood where you've used in or your own neighborhood, weekends with certain family members, especially if they've used, or maybe just like being around them is very triggering because they cause you a lot of stress and there's a lot of baggage there. When in physical pain, and there's a lot more, but anything outside of you that is connected to use. It could literally be like, I've had people throw away clothes because it's the clothes that you would use in, and seeing the shirt reminded them of it, you know, like that could be a thing. Trying to think what other things could be it. Of course, like being in jail could be a trigger. The next set though is internal triggers. So this is a more wide range of things, but they all happen inside of us, and they're all emotions basically, right? They're emotions, they're thoughts. Even our behaviors though can be like an internal trigger. They're things that we can control, but we can't avoid them. We can't avoid sometimes feeling anxious, but we can control them when it comes on. So of course, like being afraid, frustrated, neglected, angry, guilty, nervous, even feeling very confident, because that can be like a cockiness thing, like I can handle using now, that could be a trigger. Being happy, being criticized, being pressured, feeling inadequate, depressed, insecure, even feeling relaxed could be a trigger, like, oh, well, I'm relaxed now, it's time for the beer that I would have after I come home from work every day. Being embarrassed, being sad, jealous, being excited, like the celebratory kind of use, lonely, humiliated, anxious, worrying, grieving, being overwhelmed is a really common one, misunderstood, being hungry. They say like hungry, angry, lonely, tired are 4 very powerful triggers. They represent the acronym HALT, H-A-L-T. And if you're feeling any of those 4 things, they say to literally halt, stop yourself, and solve it, because they can trigger somebody to want to use. All of those states are not great to be in. I mean, if you've ever been really hungry, we don't make good decisions all the time when we're hungry. Those are all internal triggers, okay? So they're tied to our emotions, and if you can figure out what things trigger the emotion, what things lead to the emotion, then you can avoid that thing sometimes. Sometimes you can't avoid all of it. Like you can't always avoid work, and work might be the thing that leads you to feeling anxious. So instead you can cope with that, learning skills you would learn in therapy, right? All of these things that I'm talking about, you can learn these skills while you're in therapy. And the next video I do is going to be on coping with these triggers and how to deal with that, okay? So watch that one next if you want to learn how to deal with these things.